continuing on to the next chapter, it is this is a massive chapter that I'll try to get through. A lot of this is going to be with this guy's experience of going into transforming Russia from a war mentality to a peace mentality. And it is relevant because the same systems that we need to change is the same thing that had to happen over there. So it may seem a little boring, but it is definitely very relevant. The book is not so much focused on his own personal experience. It gets into a lot of deep sciences, but in order to open up your comprehension to understand what this guy is talking about, you gotta kind of hear some of these stories that may seem a little long, but here goes. Let me start this recording. There's a voice audio recording of this reading book too. So this is The Dance of Life. This is the second chapter, Teaching in Russia. It was 35 degrees below zero, with a wind chill making it closer to 55 below. We waited for 25 minutes before we deplaned half a mile from the terminal. We stood huddled together against the wind until a double bus airport transport pulled up. The military guards stood and the passengers waited another 15 minutes, still huddled together for warmth. Nothing I wore made any difference against the cold. It seemed I was frozen almost completely through by the time we shuffled into the bus, were transported to the heated airport terminal. I had been invited to Irkutsk. I suck at pronouncing shit. By a group of people I barely knew. Irkutsk is a city of more than 1.5 million people and nestled on a frozen plains of Russian Siberia. A handful had attended one of my classes. I was not sure I would even recognize them by sight. During the endless lines, I was at least partly warmed up by the sight of a man holding up a copy of the book Holodyanmics. I waved in recognition and smiled my relief. In a relatively short time, I was embraced by some very robust, beaming people who had come to greet me. Their eyes were ablaze with excitement as the young woman stepped forward and introduced herself as my translator. At last, the father of holodynamics has come to visit, she explained. They were very excited that you were here in their home city. They were so anxious for you to see their center. We packed ourselves into several cars and made our way to a nice restaurant, much like one would find in any large city. I remember sitting near the fireplace. I was so thankful for the warmth. The conversation was widely Russian, with a lot of laughter. My translator could not begin to keep up with their enthusiasm. She kept getting so involved she forgot to translate, and we would all laugh when I would burst in, attempting to be an active part in the celebration. After a leisurely dinner, we piled in the cars, and the translator explained, we are going to visit the Holodynamic Center. A few guests have been invited who had a special interest in holodynamics. We drove right to the center of the city and pulled up in front of the city hall. The steps of the building must have spanned more than 100 meters in a gentle curve that had been cleared of ice and snow. City Hall is a large contemporary building made of Russian gray marble. A distinguished man with silver hair, wearing a blue pinstripe suit, stepped out of the door to greet us. He shook my hand and said in perfect English, we are extremely pleased to welcome you to our city. It is great honor that you have come. As we quickly huddled back into the building to get out of the cold, my translator nudged me and whispered, he's the mayor. Our heavy coats were collected from us in the waiting room, and the mayor ushered us through two beautiful carved double oak doors, each standing more than 6 feet high. They led to the city council room, an auditorium holding more than 300 people. I saw at a glance there was not an empty seat in the auditorium. As I stepped into the room, the audience rose as one began a long clapping ovation. I observed that the people were mostly middle-aged and all appearing to be well-dressed, solid, productive-looking people. Finally, the mayor quieted them down, and we moved to the center podium. I was impressed with the beauty of the place, its modern design, and every detail finished with fine craftsmanship. The mayor spoke for only a minute, and everyone rose and began clapping again. He greeted them and asked how many of them have been helped by holodynamics, the translator explained. Again, he had to quiet them. I present to you Dr. Vernon Wolfe, the father of holodynamics. Again, they stood and clapped. They have been waiting for 2 hours, the translator whispered as I rose to my feet. We spent an hour and a half together. I had been warmed by their welcome. We discussed in some detail the principles of holodynamics. I brought them news about the outside world. I thought the meeting was over as I thanked them for inviting me and sat down. But Maria, the coordinator for holodynamic program in Kurtz, had met me at the airport, stood and invited anyone who wished to personally greet me to stand in line, almost the entire group in the line. There was no normal greeting. The first woman in line was tall, big-framed, and dressed in expensive clothing. Through broken English, she explained, Dr. Wolfe, I had a liver ailment. I am very wealthy and have traveled around the world looking for something that could help me with my ailment. After being to so many clinics, including your Mayo Clinic in the United States, I could find nothing to help and had given up and returned home to die. Then here, in my hometown, I found that person over there. She pointed to Maria and continued, Since then, she has taught me holodynamics. I have been able to completely heal myself. I am so grateful. She wrapped me in her arms, laid her head on my shoulder, and wept, shaking with gratitude. She was unwilling to let me go. It was all I could do to keep from weeping with her. By the fourth person, I wept openly right along with everyone else. Such miraculous events were reported. So many people, so filled with so much joy, so many people healed, and so many helped in so many ways. Every person in line had a similar story. There were about 24 people who had healed themselves from cancer. Several others had managed to relieve themselves from HIV and AIDS, and some became hepatitis B and some overcame hepatitis B and C, and I listened as they talked about their healings. Families miraculously reunited, new businesses started, and problems solved. Most took the time to thank not only me for sending them the information on how to unfold potential and develop wellness, but to thank a small team of people who were trained in holodynamics principles and had been taught others to access and transform their holodyne. So many people have been helped in such a short time that even I, so accustomed to hearing of extraordinary results, was also overcome by the reports. Holodynamic well-being had touched the people of the city in Irkutsk, Russia. The Holodynamic Center was situated on the main floor of City Hall. By the time I had arrived, much of the city had become awakened to these new dimensions of reality and of consciousness. When this new information, they had found new ways of solving problems, healing diseases, empowering potential, and creating a success in an environment that was extremely harsh. This stuff truly does heal. Cancer, AIDS, mental illness. This goes back to at least 20, 30 years ago that this story was being told. I wish you could see the one book was written in 1990. The book Holodynamics was written in 1990. So we're going back at least 20 years that this meeting took place. And I'm being challenged with the birds. My first encounter with Russian consciousness. The reason I mention the people of Irkutsk is because similar holodynamic programs became active in more than 100 cities throughout the former Soviet Union. These programs were made possible by a series of events that began in America. My first encounter with Russians occurred during a series of seminars in Utah. I think what actually started the ball rolling, I'm going to continue on another tape and have the bird on my shoulder. I tried that earlier, but he flew away, so I'm going to have to do something to keep this bird quiet, and then I'll continue. Peace out.